This is Michelle. She's one of our key managers, been with us a lot of years. She is a wealth of knowledge. It's amazing what she knows. I asked her some things. Michelle, what do you think of this? How do we figure this out? And so she's also on our speaking circuit. She goes out and teaches a lot of our classes. And then I've got Jonny. Come up here, Jonny. You're just hanging out in the shadows. Jonny owns Jonny Tree and Landscape Service. He is, in my opinion, the foremost arborist in town. So he's my go-to guy. Whenever I need big tree jobs, any kind of tree work, I call Jonny's. For my own work or work here, he's done quite a few projects for us. Yeah, come on over. So I called a couple weeks ago and said, Jonny, would you be willing to come in and help us teach a fruit tree class? And so he said, yes. Can't believe it, because I know you guys are jammed right now. You're in the peak of the pruning season. So.
Oh yeah, very much so.
So with that, give it up for Michelle and Jonny's Tree Landscape Service. There you go. Is that
right? Yeah. There you go. So I do want to welcome you to Waters Garden Center. I want to talk a little bit about the fruit trees and fruits that you can actually grow here in the Prescott Valley area. Even though there's some distance between it, we're kind of all that same zone. So we are zone 7, which means everything can take it down to 0 to 10 degrees. I imagine most of you are new. So, there is a Gardening for Newcomers class that you'll probably want to come back to if you are new. We kind of go over all the steps and things that make Prescott unique. But just a little bit about the fruit trees and fruits that you can grow here. We do really well with apples and peaches, or apples and pears, because they have a tendency to bloom later in the year. Peaches, nectarines, plums, cherries, all of those also do well. The only downfall with those is that the peaches and nectarines, apricots usually bloom first. So if we do happen to get a cold front that comes through, sometimes they'll get nipped. So you will not get peaches like last year.
You get apples or pears.
It's very seasonal. So it just kind of depends on the year. If you want to step back to that year, last year was cold, wet, pretty miserable, almost until the end of May. It was just a very strange, crazy year. So yeah, we didn't get a lot. There was a few. I had some customers that came in and said, oh, my peaches were great. So I don't know if they had a kind of a microclimate where everything's kind of protected or not, but for the most part, the majority of the folks here in Prescott did not get fruit last year. So it just depends on the year. We do raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, grapes, the whole gambit of fruit. So if you like fruit, this is a great place to be. Ken kind of mentioned citrus. Most people, if you want citrus, it's one of those things, you get a dwarf one, you bring it out in the summer, you bring it in the winter. They just will not do well out, or they'll freeze. It's just the way it is. For those of you that have smaller areas and don't have a room enough for a tree, there are dwarf trees that only get 5 or 6 feet tall and wide, work really well in a pot, so you can have fruit. It's just a matter of rethinking how you garden. A pot of strawberries works really well, and you get your fruit. So there are a lot of different ways of doing things if you want to have fruit in your garden. So the first thing about planting fruit trees is take a look at the size that you have. Do you have a lot of space? Do you want a small orchard? You just have one spot for a tree. You have to be very picky about which tree you're going to put in there. Pollination is really, really important with a lot of different fruits. If you're an apple fan, you're probably going to want to get some extra space because most apples need a pollinator. If you don't have a lot of space, maybe a peach, an apricot, nectarine, all of those are self-fertile. They don't need a pollinator. They usually do better if there's another tree. It depends on the plums, what type it is. There are a few that are self-fertile. The Italian prune is one of them that is self-fertile. Pears are another one that usually need a pollinator. So basically what pollination gives you is you need a tree that is blooming at the same time period as a tree that you have, and not the same type, which is really where you would think you would have to have the same type, but you don't. They need to be different in order to get that pollination. They don't have to be necessarily right on top of each other, as long as they're within that 50 feet. Line of sight is really important for that. That way you get the bees going back and forth. Trees make great ornamental trees as well, fruit trees do. If you are in a yard that doesn't have a lot of space, a small peach tree is a great ornamental tree. Look at these pretty pink blossoms that are popping out right now. Most of your fruit trees come in standard, which means they're going to get about 30 feet tall. Most of the ones that we bring in are semi-dwarf, which helps keep that size in that 12 to 15 foot range. The true dwarf trees, like I said earlier, are going to get in that 5-6 foot range depending on the type of tree that we get. The other thing really nice about fruit trees is they can be topped once they get to a certain size, and I'm sure Jonny will go through kind of how you go about doing that. The principle of the thing is you kind of top them and you make them kind of spread out, so easier to pick, easier to manage. Chill hours are one of the things that you're going to see on the tag. Most of them are going to need 600 to 800 hours of chill, which just basically means that we need nighttime temperatures to be below 45 degrees. It's not as low as you think it does. It's just that nighttime temperature above 40 or below 45. And that gets your fruit production going, and that's why it's really, really important. Buying fruit trees, spring is optimal as far as getting them in the ground. Now is perfect, especially when they're dormant like this. They don't go through transplant, can't talk to them. They don't go through transplant shock, so you don't have to worry about the fruit dropping if you buy them a little bit later. Once you get them in the ground and they'll leaf out for you, they'll bloom for you. So you have all that to look forward to. A little bit about maintenance on fruit trees. Most fruit trees are pretty easy to care for. Feeding is very, very necessary. We here at Waters recommend you fertilize your trees and shrubs 3 times a year for your deciduous fruit trees, deciduous shade trees, all of that stuff. The fourth is the evergreens. You want to hit them in like January, so you get that extra feeding focus. Yes, sir.
The fertilizer you guys sell here, are those also good trees or special fertilizer?
His question was about fertilizer. Last year we had a really big discussion on fertilizers, and we decided to come up or reintroduce the fruit and vegetable fertilizer. So it is specifically geared towards that fruit tree element and veggies. Basically, the difference between the two is it has a calcium element to it, which helps with that fruit production. It's great for tomatoes, vegetables, and that type of thing, so you don't get that blossom end rot, which is usually a deficiency in calcium. A lot of times with fruit trees, you also go through this season where, oh, my fruit tree is just loaded with fruit. I just have so much. And then you'll start seeing peaches or apricots all over the ground, apples. The reason this happens is it's kind of a self-defense mechanism of the tree. It just gets too much for the tree to bear. Fruit production takes a lot of energy. So if you do have a lot of fruit on your trees, it might sound, oh, I'm going to have bushels and bushels of fruit. But you're actually putting stress on that tree. And trees, the healthier you're going to keep your tree, the more it'll produce, the bigger your fruit, and the less diseases and stuff you'll have. So it's really, really important. So if you don't get enough fruit dropping off on its own, you will want to go through and pick some of that off. It's really important to get the ones on the ends where your heavier branches are. Keep them in the middle of your tree so you don't get that breakage. It's really, really important to take care of your tree.
When you plant a fruit tree, we talked about javelinas, but so deer, especially during rutting season, are extremely dangerous to small tree.
I'm going to hit on that a little bit. His question was about deer, and I'll touch base really quick on the end. The thing with the fruit is that, especially if it's a newly planted tree, you really want to be careful of that fruit production. Again, when you first plant that tree, you want all that energy to go into your root system, so your tree can get a good base on it. If you're worried about fruit production right away, fruit is something you've got to have patience for. You need to get that tree going and in the ground and ready to produce. And it usually takes a couple, 2 or 3 years to get that root base healthy, and so it can actually support all that fruit that you really want to get. Someone had a question about that birds getting the fruit before it ripens. There are several different types of netting that you can put over. It's really, really important to get that on soon, opposed to later. Once your tree gets super big, it's really hard to get it on. And it's really, really important to cover the whole tree. You want to get underneath it because they can come right up the middle. So it's really, really important to make sure it's covered correctly. Yes.
I know I was reading from you guys that it was really important to give them fertilizer in the early fall. Well, I never got around to it, so.
Okay. Her question was she forgot to fertilize in the fall. So I would say if you have not fertilized, now is a good time to do it. Usually we say fertilize Easter, 4th of July, Halloween, and New Year's for your evergreen. So we're getting onto that time frame where you want to get that down. Looking at the trees, I don't know if anybody's been walking around, but mine are ready to pop. So it's about time. So I would say now is a great time to get that down.
I have mature apple trees and I have pumpkin fruit starts with worms.
I'm going to touch on that real quick. But his question was is the worms that get into the fruit. Basically, the reason that they get in there is right now is a perfect time to get the dormant oil on. This is a mineral oil-based product that you spray on your trees when it's like this. Basically, you're suffocating any bugs, insects, diseases that are on this tree. Basically, you're just going to hose it down so it's basically dripping off this tree. That's going to kill anything that's on there that's living, that might be overwintering, hasn't hatched yet. So we're going to try to get rid of all that stuff early and now. Where this comes in for you is once your flowers start blooming, usually April, Mayish. This year it might be a little bit earlier, I don't know. But you'll want to spray this as the blossoms start falling off, because those worms aren't crawling in, they're crawling out. The coddling moth lays eggs in the flower, and basically it's the larvae coming out of the flower.
You're saying that this is a different time to use that?
Absolutely.
Is there anything available that you feel from the root system?
No. Because it's a fruit tree, you don't want anything systemic going up into your fruit.
Because I had a so-called arborist in the spring, and it says West Perfect from New York. Well, for 2 years, they were bearing the seeds. They somehow, what they did, they killed that, and I never had any fruit, so I stopped using that.
Yeah.
And then just last year, it started to bear a lot of fruit again.
So this is a natural product. It's basically mineral oil. So it's not going to keep your tree from fruiting. There's a lot of different things that can cause, non-fruit.
Prior to that, we were getting treated on it, and then it became the rice lady called, so-called specialist for that.
There's also a little tent-like thing that has a pheromone in it that actually attracts those coddling moths. We actually tell you to pair them together, because once you start seeing those coddling moths in the trap, then it's time to start spraying your blossoms. Yes, ma'am?
Does that product have a shelf life?
It's an oil, so I would say as long as it's kept inside and it does not freeze, it'll be fine.
So I just want to be clear. So you spray it when it's like this now, and you spray it again when the blossoms fall off.
Correct.
And I have a second question about fertilizing. My orchard happens to be in the area that is fenced for my dogs. Is the fertilizer safe for pets, or would I need to put a fence around the base of each tree to keep my dogs from digging in that dirt?
So our fertilizer is pet friendly. That being said, some pets are attracted to it because of the ingredients that are put into it. So if they're just around and nipping one or two of the pellets out, it's not going to hurt them. But I will advise you to make sure that that bag is up somewhere where they can't get into it, because it will hurt them if they eat a whole bag.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is just, usually we say we're lazy gardeners and we just throw it on. I would say if you have those kind of dogs, I would work it into the soil.
Okay.
Yeah. I've heard two sets of things. His question was, will a crabapple and an apple pollinate each other? I've heard two sets of information on that, so I'm not quite sure on that. But I want to kind of stop the questions for just a little bit so I can get back on track, and then we'll open it up either after Johnny's done, or we'll all be around to answer the questions. One of the questions we get, and we'll send this out to, is it's basically a calendar of events for fruit trees. We'll make sure that you get one of these when we send all that information out. But basically it tells you when to spray that dormant oil onto the trees. is January, February. February, March is when we do the tree trimming. March and April, we fertilize. We spray the dormant oil onto the flowers to catch the coddling moths. April, May, and June, you start watching for bugs, fungus, and other diseases. Sometimes you'll get aphids, sometimes you'll get spider mites, sometimes you'll get thrips. All of these things can be detrimental to your tree, but they're real easy to catch and take care of pretty quickly. June is when you start to thin your fruit out. Like I said, if you see a heavy fruit production, you probably want to cull some of that off, especially if you're looking for larger fruit. The better fertilized your fruit is, the larger it's going to be, and the healthier your tree is going to be. July, we're back to fertilization. And harvest time for some things. You start seeing your cherries, a few of your peaches and plums will start to ripen, usually towards the end of July, but you'll start seeing it. August is harvest time for the rest of the cherries and that type of thing. Peaches, plums, and apricots. September, you'll start seeing your pears and apples. And then October is when you'll finally get that push. So we kind of created this last year, and we found it really helpful for a lot of things. So I'm gonna actually let Jonny get up here and talk. We do have an arsenal of products that we do recommend that you have on hand, so it's easy to go out and say, ooh, I've got aphids, let me go spray that. So it can get taken care of really quickly. It's really important to be knowledgeable about your plants. Pay attention to them. They'll talk to you if you listen. They'll tell you when they're stressed out or when they need fertilizer. You'll start seeing leaves that have dark green veins. You know, that's usually a deficiency of some sort. So your plants will talk to you as you kind of let them grow. So I'd